Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Hey there. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. I hope you like that intro. Welcome to the first Thelemic Ronin official video. I have one video on that playlist, but it was from the Walk Magic, and I just kind of tucked it into both Walk Magic and Thelemic Ronin playlists. But welcome to the first strictly Thelemic Ronin playlist. Real quick, yeah, I've been on hiatus from YouTube just to get a break and refresh, not to burn out. I've been focusing a lot on my art, doing a painting of Krishna. I finished my painting of Buddha, Siddhartha, and I was gonna make a really fun video for this playlist, probably in a week or two. I've slowly started working on the script, a little here, a little there. I was gonna do it about a very fun topic called, about the Book of the Law and fill me being changed to kill me and that whole thing. And I may even put that one off because I also, have been looking at the Magic Without Tears, and so chapter 10 is really fun. We're talking about translation of language and then some Buddhism in chapter 10 of Magic Without Tears, and so I kind of just wrote the introduction to that just to have the ball rolling. I feel like when I start something, it makes it easier to continue and to just do it and get stuff out. But today something really interesting happened, and I want to talk about this. This kind of was like, oh, I could come out of hiatus for this. This is a fun topic, right? Now, we're going to talk about climate change. We're going to talk about, I like to be a practitioner with stuff. I'm not so much into the scholarly aspect of things. When I'm talking, I like to inspire what can we do, right? As opposed to just book studies, right? So we're going to talk about climate change. We're going to talk about ecological crises and how we as humans are responsible for that. What we can do as individuals, what needs to be done as a species, as a whole, right? And what some of the problems are there. And what prompted this was something I saw on Facebook today. Is kind of ridiculous. Stephen Skinner, who's a fairly well-known occult book publisher, he's an author, he put out a very weird post, and you should be able to see it on your screen now. He wrote, "The ideas are true, even if the guy's a bit OTT." I don't know what OTT is. I'm assuming he means out of his fucking mind, right? Um, but then you go on, and it's just a bunch of quotes of Trump's dementia rants, right? About how, oh, we can't switch to wind power because then there'll be no energy if there's no wind, so you can't watch TV. And it's like, wait, so this is proof of climate change denial? Like, this is why climate change is a hoax? Because this lying, conniving con artist who doesn't know shit about almost fucking anything he opens his mouth about, every time somebody asks him, oh, I don't know, we'll have to look into that. Like, the guy's a fucking compulsive liar and a moron, and only says things if it gets clout, if it's gonna, in his mind, get him some type of more attention. Right? He's like a walking embodiment of Rahu. How can I get more attention? What can I do to get more attention? Right? What do I think people want to hear to get more of what I want? I want more money. I want more power. I want more fame. And yeah, he just bungles it all. So anything that Donald Trump says, I don't give two shits about, because it's not proof of anything, because he doesn't say things based on evidence or fact or context. He just says things that he thinks his base wants to hear. So, okay, it's one thing to go into the science and try to look for evidence of why our planet is not on ecological collapse trajectories right now. It's another thing, to not believe in climate science because Donald Trump said something. Yeah. So we're going to talk about a bunch of things. So I quickly wrote some notes, right? I am not a climate scientist. I'm not a marine biologist. I'm a Thelemite. I like to live in harmony with my surroundings as much as possible. And when I see something that's completely wrong or fucked up, if it's within my power or knowledge to do something about it or say something or to let people know, like, hey, wait, this is wrong as I see it, and maybe I'm not the only one that sees it this way, and maybe I'm wrong and I could be corrected in this process. But yeah, I happen to know a little bit about climate change, even though I'm not like a official physics scientist or anything. You know, I don't do earth science. I don't do anything along those lines. But yeah, for a little bit of background, I guess I would just say when I was at Harvard, I took a course on climate change, and it's one of the reasons I went vegetarian. You know, because it's pretty screwed up where we're at and what we're doing as a species, right? So let's talk about a couple of things, right? Yeah, there's an article that I read in that course on climate change. Again, when I was at Harvard doing a little bit of study into this matter, I specifically chose the course because it's not that I was on the fence with climate science, just that I didn't know too much about it. And even, 10 years ago, I don't like to have strong opinions if I feel uninformed. I like to reserve my opinions for once I have some type of facts presented to me, and then I can make my decision of what I think is the likely conclusion about something after I'm presented with evidence and scientific research and, case studies over a course of time to see trajectories, right? All of those things. There was this one article, and I'll post it because it was a while ago since I read it, and I'm not going to do any quotes from it, but it was The Uninhabitable Earth, and it was published by The New Yorker, right? So I'll try to find a link and put that in the description if possible. But that and some of the other texts that we went over, both by scientists and activists, really swayed me in a way of like, oh, what can I do as an individual to help the environment rather than just do whatever I want without having any insights into what I'm doing, and is there an impact of my actions or not. Mind you, at the end of this video, I'll go into capitalism because there are things that we can do as individuals which are so minuscule to reducing ecological crises across the globe. We need things to really change on a governmental and societal level as a whole. A lot of the damage being done to the environment is coming from, I would say the 100 biggest corporations globally that their main objective is to make money, and if we destroy everything in the process, it doesn't matter because a company doesn't have morals. It has CEOs that their primary goal is to make money. And if making money kills people or damages the environment or kills wildlife or whatever, it doesn't matter because their only goal is to make money, right? We'll talk a little bit about oil. We'll talk about a lot of things. So like I said, when I took that course, I immediately became vegetarian right after. And for me, being vegetarian is not to push it on anybody else. You can eat whatever you want, and have your own reasons for doing so. One, I love animals. I don't really like hurting animals, especially having them slaughtered for my own benefit. I think if people had to slaughter their own animals for their own consumption, there would be a lot more vegetarians. Because, this is a living being with feelings and a life, and you're just killing it for consumption. And there are other things that you could consume, especially in today's world where, fake meat products are so overly abundant in most places that I don't miss eating meat. I could get a Beyond Burger once in a while, and there are plenty of raw and organic vegetables that are really good for you, and you could get all of your proteins and nutrients that way. But yeah, so the meat industry. The primary, you'll hear this in right-wing media a lot, saying that the meat industry, it's, climate, in regards to climate change. Oh, we can't eat, the left doesn't want us to eat meat anymore because cows are farting. And it's like, well, it's when you have millions upon millions of cows and other livestock producing methane gas that, yeah, that does contribute to something called the greenhouse effect, which I'll go into again in a moment, with a few other subjects. That's one of the problems. The other problem is when you need space to store this many animals. I didn't look up how many animals are, like cows, are slaughtered in a year, but I'm sure it's a lot, right? And you need space to keep those animals. You need fuel to run the tractors and machinery that deals with processing all of that meat, all of the chemicals, especially in the United States. The chemicals that go into meat, meat is not meat. Meat is not supposed to look that bright yellow, bright pink, all of the chemicals injected into the food that they eat and whatever they do. I don't know if there's some type of bleaching that happens to the meat, but yeah, if you go to other areas of the globe, meat looks like meat. It's like a dark red, it's like a maroon color. Here, you go to the supermarket, everything is like this bright fluorescent pink, made to look attractive, and that's not the way meat looks. But I'm getting off the point. You need a place to house these animals, and so that requires farmland. And yeah, there is a lot of flat grasslands in the United States where farms happen to be, but there's also a lot of deforestation that comes from housing that many animals. They overconsume plant life through grazing. So those are two other things. So the land use, the way the land is used, cutting down of forests to provide various things. You need wooden enclosures for these animals. You need housing for these animals. The way that we use wood, and this touches on something else, right? So it's not just the methane gas produced, it's the grazing and the way that we structure our land, that there should be some type of vegetation there that is no longer there because of animal consumption of it. So plant life absorbs a lot of those chemicals like nitrogen and carbon dioxide that go into the atmosphere and are basically causing the greenhouse effect. And a greenhouse effect, I guess I could skip ahead to that. The greenhouse effect is basically there are several big chemicals, such as sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, that all get put up into the ozone layer, and that doesn't allow heat to pass through them as easily. Some heat still gets out through the ozone layer. It's reflected off of the earth from the sun or through the ice caps, but a lot of that heat gets stored under the ozone layer, thereby raising the temperature of the earth very slowly over many years. And so that's what's happening. That also causes the ice caps to melt a bit, which I'll get into one thing in a second about. There's actually a study that showed the ice caps actually got larger this year in one specific part. I don't have the details off the top of my head, so I'll pause and just look up a quick article. But generally speaking, the ice caps are getting smaller, which is going to slowly increase ocean levels, right? And also the ice caps reflect light because of their bright white color. And so that light is supposed to bounce back through the ozone and escape the earth, but with less surface area of that color substance, there's more dark ocean, and the ocean is actually absorbing more of that heat. Not to mention, through other things, the ocean is containing more carbon dioxide, which is killing things like the coral reefs, and other marine life is dying because of that, right? But anyway, let me pull up that article about the ozone, about the ice caps getting larger. Here we go. So I got something by The Guardian, and I'll just read like the first paragraph, or I'll read the title. Antarctic ice has grown again, but this does not buck overall melt trend. First paragraph. A new study shows that after decades of rapid decline, the Antarctic ice sheet actually gained mass from 2021 to 2023. This is a reminder that climate change does not follow a smooth path, but a jagged one, with many small ups and downs. Now, just when I typed in the prompt, ice caps larger this year? No. As of March 2025, the Arctic sea ice reached its lowest winter maximum extent on record. That means, to date, since we've been measuring the ice caps, this past winter into spring, the Arctic ice caps were smaller than ever at that time of year. So there is a definite melt that is happening. And so, again, when there's less of that white icy color to reflect the light back up into the ozone layer and out of the planet, well, it's getting absorbed by the ocean, which then increases the ocean water, right? That's problematic, right? That's really problematic. So, again, I became vegetarian, as I was saying before, I got distracted, as a way, one, of it's a small thing that I can do, but also if somebody asks why I'm vegetarian or how did that happen, because sometimes people do inquire, I tell them, well, I took a course, I learned a little bit more about climate change, and it actually kind of scared the crap out of me that, wow, we are on a bad trajectory as a species, and our ecosystems globally are not doing well on the most part, between pollution and climate change and a bunch of other things. And so if I could eat less meat as an individual, it gives me a chance to have this conversation with you. And then you can make your decision about, maybe you can do something, not necessarily going vegetarian, but maybe you're inspired to go do something or talk to more people and let more people know that, oh yeah, let me do some research on this thing instead of just believing what other people tell me. Let me actually read some articles. Let me read some scientific journals. Let me read some case studies. Let me read some peer review articles about this subject of, our ecosystems collapsing. And maybe I could do something to help the environment rather than hurt it. So being vegetarian is a way for me to spark that conversation. It's also a way for me to make the most minuscule of impacts, right? Like I said, anything that we can do as individuals is just a small percentage of the problem. The biggest problems are corporate pollution and oil industries. Those are between planes, cars, and then after that is the meat industry. But planes and cars, really, it's like, as long as airplanes are flying and we're burning jet fuel in the atmosphere, we are headed for disaster, as far as climate scientists tell us. Next, let's just talk about the concept of fossil fuels, right? So fossil fuels are what they sound like. They're fuel that came from fossils. They are large extinct animals, primarily dinosaurs, that died in large clusters, and the decomposition so deep under the earth created oil. And there were other natural oils, and that's the gist of it. So it was basically a lot of oils from extinct animals that we are using as a fuel source. The other thing that we use as a fuel source is coal, which has mostly been phased out but is still sometimes burned. Those are the two biggest things, right? So we use oil for heating, for gas, for air travel, right? Power grids, so energy, power, electricity. Um, the other thing fossil fuels could be used for is plastic. So a lot of times, think of your plastic soda bottle as you're drinking out of a deceased dinosaur, essentially, or some other deceased animal, in large part. It could also be some type of deceased plant life and vegetation. I don't have the exact percentages of how much fossil fuels and gas tend to be animal or plant life. I don't have those statistics at hand. I'm not going to look them up. You could do that yourself if you're interested. But yeah, we also make plastics from fossil fuels. Now, here's the problem, right? We are not responsible as people, as a species. The way we use things, we just tend to discard them without a thought about how this is going to impact 50 years down the line. We're more concerned with like a 2 to 3 year time frame. A lot of times because we have short lifespans. We mature now at around 20 to 30 years old. From, let's say, 25 to 50 is when most people are really considered an adult and become very conscious about certain things. And then they're on a decline out the door, and they stop worrying so much because now their life's over and things don't really matter because they don't know what's going to happen after they die anyway. So they might care if they have a family that they're leaving behind in future generations. But on the most part, our politics is set up, at least in the U.S. there are still monarchs in the globe, but most places there's elected representatives, and those representatives serve 2 to 5 year terms, generally speaking. So they're more concerned with, am I going to get elected in 3 years, and how do I do that? Do I need corporations to give me money as lobbyists, and then because they gave me money I have to make laws that are in favor to that specific company? um, things along those lines. So, or they kick the can down the road because they don't want to be the person that stirred the pot right before an election and upset either a big presidential election or their own future reelection. Um, and so they're not really worried. There are politicians that are, paying attention and actually trying to do better for future generations. But there are a lot that are more just concerned with, a 2 to 4 year time frame and not really worrying about big problems that are going to happen 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And so that's probably been that way always, or at least for a long time. But we've known that, since the Industrial Revolution and coal and then fuel and gas and oil, right? It's escalated from like the 1960s, 70s up until now. We saw, oh crap, the last X amount of years that we were burning oil from pre 1960 all the way up till now already caused things that we're seeing are bad. Well, by the 80s, we knew, oh shit, it's gotten even worse. And in 50, 60 years from now, we are going to be in a crisis. And now we are at that point, but people just keep kicking the thing down the road, kicking the can down the road. And so, well, let's talk about plastic. First of all, if you use plastic, it's fine. You're not the one probably producing it. I think if we had a good way to recycle it, I know that they're doing things with like mealworms or other bacteria or fungus that can eat the plastic and decompose it, because it takes a long time to decompose. If you're using plastic, fine. If you're using plastic, try to get clear plastic, because colored plastic is less likely to be recycled, because unless the company is specifically looking for green or brown plastic, they're just going to use clear plastic, and then they could dye it whatever color they want, or keep it clear and then it could be reused, whatever. But yeah, so colored plastics are really bad. But even when you recycle, a lot of times, especially in some states that don't really care about recycling, they just ship it out of the country. Like there was a lot of stuff getting, I forget if it was like Ecuador or something. We shipped a lot of our plastic to Ecuador, where it was supposed to be recycled and then either resold or reused. And it was, we gave the country money. They took the money to recycle this and also a profit. They pocketed the money and then just dumped it in the ocean. I believe China does the same thing. They just dump it right in the ocean. So to the point that now in the Pacific Ocean, it's been years, and we have a gigantic floating barge. I heard a podcast today. Let me get the numbers really quick. Here we go. On average, every year, 20 million tons of plastic is dumped into the ocean. So that's a lot of plastic that's being dumped into the ocean, and that kills plant life. Some of it eventually does break down into small pieces. That's killing marine biology, fish, coral reefs, animals. The coral reefs actually filter out carbon dioxide in the water, which doesn't allow it to get released back up into the atmosphere. So as coral reef is dying in some places, like by Australia, the Great Coral Reef, I don't know if it's completely dead at this point, but most of it was dying or dead. Last I had checked a while back. This plastic causes problems in the ocean. There are, if you see, like, I see it online, like short little videos, which I don't really believe much of that stuff, but this particular one is valid. Like, we just throw stuff into our rivers, and so you'll see videos where like people are cleaning out a river full of all types of trash, and a lot of it is plastic. Our salt has microplastics in it. things get caught around animals' necks in the ocean and they suffocate and they can't breathe, like sea turtles that need air. No, they don't breathe water, they breathe air, so they try to come up. They get stuck in like a six-pack holder and choke to death, or a fishing line, or plastic netting, or any number of other things they get constrained in. So all of that affects everything. Now on the coral reef, even if the okay, things are changing. It's getting warmer in some places, and that's so now coral reef can grow in other places which were too cold but now are the right temperature for it. We are basically reforming the shape of our earth, and what's going to happen over the course of 20, 40, 100,000 years is we are going to have revamped the face of the planet in so many ways that we are not going to be able to adapt to, is the problem. Now, if you're thinking, like, if you've ever heard this, that, oh, nitrogen and carbon dioxide is good for plant life, so plants will get bigger, and then that will just suck up all the carbon dioxide and release oxygen. Maybe that may happen. That may also take several generations, if not thousands of years to happen, and in the meantime humans are not going to be able to adapt to that because that's too long term, and the way that and even still, if that happens, that's going to reshape the face of the earth, let alone if flooding happens because the ice caps melted. There are just so many problems, right? Okay, even if you don't want to call it climate change, let's say you don't believe that the planet is getting several Celsius degree warmer at this point, and that is going to cause serious problems, and it's a result of us burning fossil fuels and the way that we overconsume stuff and we don't dispose of things properly, and we just cause a mess everywhere. Even if you don't believe in climate science, right? Why don't we just call what we're going through as an ecological devastation, an ecological crisis, and whatever the cause is, we need to fix all of those causes. Is that agreeable? I mean, here I have something from my notes that I'll just read, and I looked up a little chart on this. This is about animal life that has died over the past 500 years, like extinction and endangered list. It was at a relatively stable level, and then the way that we overconsume, the way that we do not dispose of things properly, and then once we started really burning a lot of coal and things like that, chopping down forests and wildlife sanctuaries where animals lived and had their lives, the rate as human civilization increases, the animal kingdom declines rapidly. To the point that a lot of insects that we depend on, you don't think of insects necessarily as a good thing. Bees are a common one because we know bees pollinate other plants. Bees are endangered. That is not fucking good, because if they can't help the pollination, I mean, there are some other types of insects that do pollinate, but it's not like bees that are going from flower to flower and carrying pollen, and right, there are a lot of vegetables or other products. Coffee is a big one. I'm a big coffee drinker. I love coffee. We need bees to help pollinate coffee fields. So it's like we're destroying. So the rate at which animals are going extinct is very, very alarming. That is an ecological crisis, because we all depend on every other thing. Things are here right now because things evolved this way because they're interdependent on the most part. Maybe one or two species could die off without such a great impact, but on the most part, when a lot of species are dying off real quick, other species become more overpopulous, and then the harm that they could have on either vegetables or vegetation, farming, or any number of other problems becomes so widespread that it's just really scary. So I have an article here from theroyalsociety.org, which is the United Kingdom's Royal Academy of Science. Right, so this is a credible source, and I have a block quote here, and I'll post a link to that article in the description. Quote, "The list of known recent extinctions is still only a small fraction of all species on the planet. For example, the tally of birds extinction since 1500 amounts to 1.6% of all bird species that were living in 1500. The figures for mammals and amphibians are 1.9% and 2.1% respectively. What is more concerning than the raw numbers of extinctions is that they represent a rate of extinction far above pre-human levels. End quote. So it's not that everything's going extinct. There are a lot of species that have gone extinct. There are a lot of different species. So when we say 2% of, or 1.6% of bird species that were living in 1500 are now extinct, what that represents is that there are approximately 11,000 species of birds known on the planet, and 1.6% is 176 species. Now, how many did each species have? That can range from thousands to millions of that species of bird, right? So 176 species, 176 might not sound a lot out of 11,000 species, but when you think like, oh, that could be millions of birds depending on what the species was, where it populated, right? Also, this is from like 1500, there were like 0.2% of species between like 15 and 1600s. 0.2% of birds were going extinct, whereas then in the next 300 years, it increases drastically. Yeah, and if we look further back, the numbers reflect that as well. You could do your own research, and you could quote me on that. So what we could do? I like to think practically what we can do. I don't like to just go vote, because our politicians don't give a shit about us, right? We need drastic change. You can boycott companies that are doing the most harm, because when money talks, things change. It's unfortunate that that's how our society works, that we're so fucking obstinate that we need paper currency representing shiny rocks in order to motivate our wealthy, who are supposed to have the responsibility of being our leaders and growing society and providing needs for the people, which is what we're buying from them with our labor. But you could boycott them. And to put my money where my mouth is, I boycott everything by Procter & Gamble, from Dawn soap to Gillette to a bunch of other household products, Tide. Anything made by Procter & Gamble, I fucking boycott, because I don't like that they were one of the biggest donors for advertising on Fox News, right? Because Fox News is one of the company's news quote unquote, right? One of the propaganda websites or medias that have spouted the most harmful stuff when it comes to our ecological safety. So I don't want to support companies that are making money only to give it to a news organization that is going to spout propaganda that allows these companies to further infract upon our animals, wildlife, vegetation, atmosphere, oceans, etc. I'm not going to give money to a corporation or a company that is trying to kill me, right? Or my fellow man. It's just, that's stupid. So you could boycott companies. That's a big thing that you could do. You could do activism. You could do cleanup work. You could try to reduce your carbon footprint by as much as possible, and continue to tell people why they should look into these topics for themselves. You know, this is like a crash course. I'm not doing this to give like a full line by line breakdown of climate science. These are just like bullet points of like, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And we can fix all of these problems because, of course, we can. We created the problems, so we're capable of fixing them, is what I believe. And as long as we're still here, we still have time, right? Unless our species go extinct, then we can't do anything. But as long as we're here, we can make changes, right? You can reduce your plastic intake. I try to keep my footprint, my carbon footprint, and my pollution footprint as low as possible. So I don't buy plastic as often as possible. You know, there are some things that come wrapped in tiny plastic. There's nothing that we could do about that, but I try to buy more paper type of things, or cardboard, or cartons, right, as opposed to something that's coming in plastic, single use that is going to be recycled. Trying to reduce the amount of flying, the amount of car pollution, things like that, and then trying to get corporations to change. That's a difficult one, and that requires getting probably money out of politics, and those are bigger fights than can just happen right now, but they are fights that can happen and can win, you know. Having an amendment that gets dark money and lobbying out of politics, that would be a great thing, because then politicians wouldn't be beholden to companies, right? And electing representatives that are looking to do good for people and the environment, that's something that you can do. You could look into policies and vote along those lines. And even if, like, Green parties, for instance, I'm not into the Green Party necessarily. I don't vote Green Party or anything. But just to use that as an example, let's say enough people voted Green Party in a big election, it would show other politicians like, oh, people are really interested, and if I want their votes to stay in my position of power as a, it's supposed to be a leader, it's not supposed to be power, it's supposed to be leadership. If I want to stay in my position of leadership, I need their support. So let me look at what type of policies they were voting for when they didn't vote for me. So that's something that could be done. So swaying politicians that way, writing representatives is a small, minuscule task that can help, and holding them accountable, showing up to town halls, showing up to doing activism, cleaning up stuff. This is now a group effort, you know. We always like to think of individual first, but we are a collective species, and we're living in a collective society. So we are responsible for the collective welfare of ourselves and our neighbors, you know. So we're responsible for our environment that we're polluting. A lot of this I went into more detail. I did a more modern, up-to-date take on Duty by Aleister Crowley. As Thelemites, as occult practitioners, we are supposed to be living in harmony with nature, not destroying it. Right? If you're living in harmony with nature, it's what the Lema is called doing your true will. Right? You are coming to spiritual union with the divine. You are in harmony with all things from the spiritual, the divine, all the way down to the physical, and you are able to exist and do what you need to do this incarnation. And if everybody were doing that, the theory is that we would all be at harmony with nature, and there would not be any ecological collapse right now. We have the right to chop down a tree because we can. But when you're chopping down millions of trees and you're just wasting that material on disposable things, well, that's problematic. When we're creating trash for things that we don't need, shopping Amazon and all of those websites that sell you crap that breaks in 1-2 uses, it's made super cheaply, no quality, breaks and goes in the garbage. If you stop buying that, that makes a big difference. Because then if everybody stopped buying crap like that, you know, overconsumption of garbage, it would force companies not to make that because they wouldn't be making profit. But as long as people are buying their garbage, they're going to keep making it. And it's going to keep going into landfills and into the oceans and destroying things. So there are things that we can do, right? Now here's why I did this whole thing and why I brought up Stephen Skinner at the beginning, right? I told you about that post. This is a public figure, and he's published a lot of books, and he's edited a lot of books. He edited Aleister Crowley's The Magical Diaries of Aleister Crowley, which had the 1923 Magical Diaries. He also just a couple of years ago put out a Magic Book 4, and you know, I'm glad I didn't buy that. Now I'm glad I didn't buy that and I didn't support him, because I don't want to support somebody that's posting Trump propaganda. Maybe he has other reasons for not believing in climate change. Maybe he likes Trump, maybe he doesn't. I don't give a fuck. But the world is changing so rapidly right now, and just pollution is enough to say, okay, maybe things are pretty fucking bad. Let alone all of the other stuff, rising sea tides, polar ice caps melting, greenhouse effects, all of the species going extinct, coral reef dying, animals being drowned by plastic and choked to death in the ocean. There's microplastics in our salt, right? So when somebody is posting Trump, spewing propaganda that's persuading people not to care about the environment, No, I could speak up about that because I know a little bit about this subject, and it doesn't take much effort for me to jump on here and just talk about this really quick, right? Probably just putting down, I only have bullet points if you haven't realized by listening to this. I don't have a fully fleshed out script, right? I just have bullet points, and it took me like a half hour to just research a couple of numbers and a couple of quick images to back up, and a couple of articles, right, to link in the description. So it didn't take much effort to do this, but yeah, felt I needed to speak up about this. And like I said, I wanted to do a fun video about Fill Me, Kill Me that I know people are gonna love, but that takes a lot more research. Um, but when you're a public figure, you're the first person that people who are experiencing the occult for the first time, they may read your book first. They might listen to this YouTube channel first. They might hear you say something first that affects what they are going to do later on in their magical career, because you happen to know a lot as a scholar, or at least you've edited a lot of stuff, right? Whatever, right? I've rehashed a lot of Crowley here, and I've done my best to explain my experience with it and my knowledge of it, and I continue to do that. Not that I am saying I'm an authority, but my YouTube channel may be the first thing that somebody clicks on when they're trying to learn about Liber Resh or something, because I put that out there, right? So I'm responsible, at least in that sense. Now with somebody like Stephen Skinner, I don't punch down. I'm not gonna pick on somebody that I see as, weaker than me. I see this as a person who has been a publisher and a scholar for a long time, and is somewhat of a face of the occult community. And so when you're coming out as like, oh, climate change is a hoax, and Trump destroyed climate change by ranting insanely, I don't know what other word to use, but ranting insanely, it's like, dude, not cool. And this goes for Thelemites too. Like this playlist is gonna probably touch on a lot of stuff over the years. I'm gonna talk about Wasserman. I'm gonna talk about Gunther, and what they left behind in the wake of their deaths, from Islamophobia to racism to misogyny to just a whole mess of things, right? So when you're a face of something and you're putting out harmful, damaging, hateful things, that's not really cool. And yeah, and I know people have talked a lot about this online, but at least with this, I've studied and read a little bit about a lot of these subjects, and I've paid attention to trends that have been happening in the scientific community and seeing what's happening. So yeah, I wanted to just speak up about that, and there will be more videos to come, like I said, because there are a lot of problems, and so this playlist is more like, oh, this is problem-fucking-matic, and, well, is there a solution here? What is the right thing? Can I research something and put out something that I feel is right information? Especially when it's being done by a figurehead, and that's exactly what this playlist is for. I thought the title is kind of cute and funny, the intro is kind of cute and funny, but the subject matter, I think, is pretty serious. And yeah, I'll just say it one more time. When you're a figure of public interest and you're saying that, climate change is not happening and everything's basically fine, don't worry about it. It's the message behind that, because the next thing behind climate change as a hoax is pay no attention to the ecological collapse that's happening. Pay no attention to what's happening in the ocean. Buy more. We need capitalism. And capitalism is not always bad, but it's just ramping capitalism that has bought out politicians is very fucking bad, because then there's no regulations, and some regulations could be too much, but in many times, if it's regulations that ensure food quality, make sure you're not getting lead in your chocolate, which is a thing. Look up how much lead is in your chocolate. You might be surprised, right? So certain regulations are really good, right? Perhaps not dumping plastic in the ocean is a good thing that our species could work on. So when you're saying don't look at all of this, that's really fucking problematic, and I just thought that this was a nice way to open up this playlist, and it was relatively easy for me to do. It just took one afternoon. So, again, air quality in many places is not great, right? Breathing in carbon monoxide and sulfur dioxide and excesses of carbon is not good. Food waste is not good. Overconsumption is not good. Destruction of land is not good. And, yeah, capitalism in the sense of like overconsumption and maximizing profits over safety, it is not good. So, love is the law. Love under will. I hope you like this video. Cheers.